Hey, good day, everybody. Dave Walker here with the Beta SMB Institute, and I am absolutely thrilled to have this panel around me right now. I had the privilege of inviting the leadership team from the National Association of Women Business Owners to join us. And wow, we have Jen Earl, who's the executive director. We have Christina Morales Haney, who is the current chairman, and Kelly Scanlon, who's an old friend who is actually the former chairwoman of NAWBO. And we're going to talk about women-owned small businesses in from as many different possible angles as we can. But let me start by introducing, first of all, Jen Earl. Welcome.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much for inviting us. Such a pleasure to be here. I'm actually the CEO of NAWBO at the national level, and I began working with NAWBO about 2008. So it's been quite some time. 6 years ago, the board twisted my arm to step into the CEO role, and I am just so very grateful that they did. NAWBO was founded in 1975 and is the unified voice of the 10 million plus women business owners out there around the country. And our mission is really to serve as a one-stop resource for propelling women business owners into greater economic, social, and political spheres of power worldwide. So it's a really great big mission, but really, really powerful. And I'm so grateful to be a part of NAWBO. I feel like it aligns with my own personal mission of just doing purpose-driven work that just makes the world a better place and really supports a really amazing demographic. And prior to NAWBO, I actually partnered in a music and sound design company. So I'm all too familiar with the ebbs and flows of entrepreneurship.
That's terrific. Christina, you're a small business owner, but you're also the chairwoman of NAWBO currently.
Yes,
Talk to us
I
about your
am
background.
I am so proud to be the current chair of the NAWBO National Board and past chapter president of NAWBO San Antonio in my home state of Texas.
Awesome.
Since 2005, I have owned and operated U.S. Safety Services, a medical first responder provider serving Central and South Texas. Now, all of my employees are state certified EMTs, emergency medical technicians. We provide our clients with emergency medical coverage at sporting, entertainment, and corporate venues, as well as warehouse, manufacturing, and distribution centers. Now, after leaving the nonprofit, then corporate world, I was ready to be a business owner. I purchased my business from a San Antonio fireman who was running it from his home. I set up my office in the same location. My business still calls home today. I became an EMT and I surrounded myself with the right team and together grew the company to the first responder business it is today. And I'm so happy to be here with you. Thank you, David.
Oh, it's great to have you, Christina. And I wish we had time to really hear the whole story because I'm sure it's fantastic. Kelly Scanlon, I've known you for years. You're the immediate past chairwoman of NAWBO. Tell us about yourself.
Well, Dave, thanks for having us on today. It's a real honor to do that. And it's great to see you again, too. Gosh, it's been way too long. And who would have thought that something like this would bring us back together? But yes, I am the chair-elect of the NAWBO Institute Board. And that's actually the C3 side of things. It's the foundation side of the organization. I'm the past chair of NAWBO National. I was in Christina's seat back in 2010. And then I'm also a past chapter president of NAWBO Kansas City. My company is Interrobang Solutions, and that is a business that provides writing, editing, and any other professional publishing services that a company might need, on an outsourced basis. I'm also the host and producer of a podcast called Talking Business Now. And prior to that, I owned a company called Thinking Bigger Business Media, which was a publishing company, really was a media company that produced a variety of publications, products, events for growth-minded small businesses. What we did is we connected them to the people, the resources, the strategies that they needed to grow to that next level. And I sold Thinking Bigger about 3 years ago and am having a great time living life 2.0.
And I can attest that Thinking Bigger was a really, really well-run, very multi-dimensional media company. Not something you see frequently executed so well at a local level like you did. So I was always
thank you, Dave. Thank you.
So we're gonna pass the talking stick as they do in in school. And the talking stick topic is the state of women-owned small business in 2021. For our audience, who are made up of tons of leaders in the space who are frankly look at women-owned small businesses as customers, they would like to hear what's the state of their customers. So Jen, starting with you, and you can be as free-ranging as you would like. And then we'll go to Christina and then to Kelly.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. So before the pandemic, I think as everyone would know, we would boast that women business owners represented the fastest growing segment of the US economy. And we employed 9.4 million people and generated 1.6 trillion in revenue. The pandemic has been difficult, as we know, for everyone, but women-owned businesses were disproportionately impacted in comparison to their male counterparts. And the impact was even greater for women business owners of color. Our partners at Facebook recently released a State of Small Business report showing that female-led small businesses reported greater reductions in sales than their male counterparts. This report also showed that while both female and male-led businesses reported their sales had fallen, a greater proportion of female-led businesses, 47%, reported that sales fell by 50% or more compared to 41% of male-led businesses. Additionally, we just recently did a report with Gusto, and we have a number of different reports that came out of that. But one key survey finding is that women business owners with school-age children were facing really unprecedented times. 61% reported that school closures had impacted their businesses, and 30% reported scaling back due to childcare needs. So it was really difficult for them to do both, to run their businesses and make sure that they were taking care of everything they had to do at home. Another key finding is the impact of women small business owners who were sole and primary providers for their households. It showed that 56% of women business owners are the sole or primary source of income for their households, and that this rate is higher among women of color, 65%. They also have little room for cushion for the economic downturn, with a median income of $55,000 and an average of 2 dependents in their households. So these women are carrying the largest load as they provide for themselves, their families, their workers, and their communities. Really quite a catastrophe for a number of women business owners across the country.
Ugh, it's just remarkable. I mean, those are horrifying statistics, to be frank. Christina, I mean, you own a business. From the perspective of your own ownership, from the perspective of the many women-owned small businesses in San Antonio that are part of your close-in community, what's your sense of not necessarily in the statistical sense, but what's your sense of how are they doing? How are they feeling?
Well, I'd like to start by sharing a little with you about what I experienced as a business owner, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
So going into the pandemic, the majority of my clients, as you probably figured out from when I introduced myself, were in the entertainment, sports, and corporate industries. So I mean concerts, all types of entertainment venues, school district activities, college and professional sporting events, corporate events, conventions, and more. So on March 3rd, 2020, all this business came to a halt.
Mm-hmm.
But in October 2020, it slowly started coming back at 3 of the venues I serve.
Mm-hmm.
Then, things change. We live in a volatile world. Then one of these venues was used as a COVID vaccination site, another as a COVID treatment center, and now to house the migrant youth. I was fortunate, though, as many businesses were, to stay in business due to my only manufacturing warehouse distribution center client. So as many of the businesses that I can speak for here in San Antonio and across the country, NAWBO members, my employees, the number of my employees decreased. I went from 90 to 45 employees just during the first few weeks of the pandemic. So I am now trying to increase my staff. And I have to tell you, as with many industries, all types of industries in Texas and across the country, I am unable to hire the employees I need,
Mm-hmm.
To get business going again. This is a major problem. All of our operating expenses have increased, from our liability insurance to the benefits, employee healthcare benefits that we provide for our employees, supplies, et cetera. all of these expenses have increased. Nonetheless, I remained in business, as many of my fellow women business owners have. And I have to say that I am blessed that as my event and corporate opportunities return, my clients have invited us back to serve. And I must say, it is so eye-opening and refreshing. Yes, there are sad stories. Yes, businesses have shut down, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And we are definitely, ladies, right, Jen and Kelly? We're reaching back, we're lifting each other up, we're moving forward.
The resilience is remarkable. What a great story. Kelly, you with your podcast, you're talking to women-owned small businesses across the country. I'm sure you'll echo a lot of what Christina and Jen have talked about, but really in your conversations with them, what are you hearing? What are the specific pain points that women-owned small businesses experienced in 2020 and are maybe still experiencing today?
Absolutely. You're right. A lot of what Jen and what Christina said are some of the things that I'm hearing. But what heartens me, what really makes me think that better days are ahead, besides, the vaccine, is that when you put a constraint on something, it forces you to think differently. It forces you to act differently. And so what COVID did was that it put a constraint on businesses. And I'm not advocating that this happen again, but when it forces you to be innovative. And I have been amazed at some of the workarounds that people have adopted, women have adopted, that they're going, why didn't I think of that sooner? Why did it take a pandemic for me to embrace this, to even think about this? And some of them had kind of considered a few of the things that they wanted to try before, and they were like, we don't know why we waited. This was our savior. This was our lifeline. Many of them were, PPP helped so many of them as well. That was a lifeline to so many of the women small businesses in particular. I think a lot of it just depended too on what industry you were in. From my own experience, and sometimes I feel a little guilty saying this, but there are businesses that have done well during the pandemic. My company is one of them, and I'm quite surprised by that. And the reason that I'm surprised is that typically in a downturn, marketing, PR, publishing, all of that is the first thing that gets cut in corporate budgets and your clients' budgets. But in my case, and I know in the case of some of my friends who are in this business, that clients needed additional messaging for their own clients. I mean, we're going to shift the workforce out to however many different homes now. And so there had to be messaging around that. There had to be messaging to external clients. There had to be messaging to the community. So there was that. And then you mentioned the podcast. Well, people were exploring new ways they couldn't go out to dinner. They couldn't do a lot of the things they were doing. Like Christina said, the events closed up. And so they started, it's a growing medium anyway, and it's experiencing organic growth. But I think that a lot of people discovered it even more during the pandemic. And so the download numbers have been phenomenal. And so I've done well, and I'm happy about that. But I'm just really heartened by, although it was a struggle, there's been so many, as Christina said, so many casualties as a result of the pandemic. There are businesses that are going to come out better on the other side of the struggle.
And I share that optimism. So Jen, from, again, passing the talking stick, same question really all the way around. What were some of the needs that small business, women-owned small businesses, what were some of the needs revealed by 2020 and now into 2021 that maybe, frankly, the large majority of people just didn't know that those were actually needs? They didn't put it together. What were some of those demands?
I'll give a few. I would say even for me personally, the need for strong empathetic leadership to really understand, like, when you're taking a group of people and you're moving them and you're having different rules and regulations and requirements and a different way of doing things, just understanding what they're going through on a professional level, but also on a personal level, to really be able to say, okay, you've got all of this workload here, but then you've got to figure out this other part of life that's happening too. And everybody's having the same life within your household. You know what I mean? Like there's a very different kind of struggle there. So being able to have grace with the people that are a part of your team, to understand where they're coming from, to give them the flexibility of working, and also the need to have the flexibility of how we do work. I would say for us at NAWBO, we had to really think about, okay, we bring our membership together for in-person events like Christina's business. That has to change now, and we have to change immediately, because right now our people need us more than ever. They need to feel connected to something. They need to feel a part of it. So I would say the network, the need for network and of support was really something that came about as well. People, I don't think that they realized how much they really needed to be with others that were like-minded. So when we opened up our virtual programming, we had opportunities, great big Zoom webinars where we had our members come in and they just started talking to each other. We provided that forum for them to connect and really understand like-minded business owners. These are my struggles, and having others echo the same thing, and being able to really support them in that space was something that was really crucial. And it expanded for us our reach, because we had members and non-members alike come to these to say, hey, I didn't know this, I didn't want to feel alone out. So that was one of the lessons learned, of like the connectivity in person, but also the connectivity online. And although there's that whole thing about Zoom fatigue and all, I would say that really having the conversation like we're doing now, where you just talk to somebody and it doesn't make you feel so isolated, in your home, missing out on the events that would have happened, naturally. So I would say those were a couple. I don't know. I know Christina and Kelly both have others they want to mention.
Sure. Christina, to you, what are some of the needs and demands that you felt got revealed in 2020 specifically for women-owned small businesses?
I love this opportunity to elaborate on, and I know that Jen has already visited with all of us here a little about leadership, the importance of that need. But I must add on to what Jen said: strong, empathetic leadership. Wow, what a need. What happened was, overnight, women business owners had to figure out how to continue to lead their businesses through an unprecedented time for which there was no roadmap. There wasn't a rule book. Now, I can say I am confident saying that most women business owners were already leading with empathy. I bet you agree, Jen and Kelly.
Yes.
Not only were they already leading with empathy, yeah, they were, but they also had to deal with their employees' newfound fears, their heightened stress levels, their varying roles, and the virus itself. So we had that going for us, gals. We were already doing this. Leading with empathy became key during the pandemic. Another need that I want to drill down on, it's always been there: access to capital. With the sudden decrease in revenue for the majority of women-owned businesses, access to capital, an issue pre-COVID that the pandemic further magnified, became perhaps the greatest issue. Women business owners needed enough cash flow to pay the bills, pay their employees, even when the assistance was not yet in place to do so, and keep their doors open. Sadly, many small women business owners did not know where to turn for access to this special capital during the pandemic.
And that, I would say, it wasn't that it was, I mean, it was revealed for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people didn't even know that access to capital was such a pernicious issue for women-owned small businesses, but also for minority-owned businesses, and particularly for women minority-owned businesses. And I think it really was because of the very frequently publicized flaws of the first round of PPP and what it revealed. I think it really did kind of smack everybody of, wait a minute, this is a rigged system. This is really not fair in any way, shape, or form. Kelly, I'll get off my soapbox. What did you see?
Well, there's a couple of things I want to address here, but I want to go back to the leadership part. That is so critical, I think, to how some of the businesses actually survived this early on. You referred to the podcast earlier. One of my best podcasts was with a woman business owner who she had been through adversity before. Her company had had a major fire. She had been through a tremendous personal illness that took her away from the business. So she was used to that business interruption, but this really threw her for a loop. But she said that you have to, as she put it, harness your inner cowgirl or cowboy and then get on your horse and ride. And you just have to do that. And she's in the restaurant industry. And you know what? She's made it through. It's been tough, but she's still here today. And I know that when I talked to her last March, she wasn't so certain about that, whether, this time in 2021, if she'd still be flipping the lights on each day. I just talked to a woman business leader yesterday, 450 employees, and she goes, when you're it and there's 450 eyes looking at you and saying, what do we do? You better be able to lead with confidence. And, if you lead with that kind of confidence, we're going to take this hill kind of attitude, then they will follow you. But you know what? You have to have built that trust beforehand. That's very important. So I just wanted to round out the leadership part there. The digital economy, we've heard so much about that and the importance of technology, especially during the pandemic. And I think a lot of times when we think of the digital economy, we think of e-commerce. And as we all know, so much of business has been moving to e-commerce and to a web-based presence for some time now. In fact, according to a recent study that Facebook conducted or had Deloitte conduct for them, 84% of business owners started using or they increased their use of digital tools during the pandemic. But I also want to point out, I think we forget that technology actually applies to so many other things as well, not just to e-commerce. For example, the contactless way in which we were forced to communicate and transact business. And again, I'm not just talking about virtual meetings like Zoom, but think about the financial transactions where digital signatures became acceptable when maybe before they weren't, or the use of real estate apps that allowed potential buyers or renters to walk through a house remotely and then be able to perform all the steps that were necessary for closing virtually. Now, many of those apps and many of those technologies already existed, but the pandemic accelerated their use and, very importantly, their acceptance. So, that digital economy, if you don't embrace that now, if you were resisting it before, I think you realized during the pandemic you didn't have a choice. Then one other thing, we've touched on this a little bit, and that is relationships, and then also ties into the access to capital piece. I think that the women business owners who had the solid business relationships with their banks came out ahead earlier on because they had that relationship in place and they could execute very quickly during that first round of PPP. And so they got, basically the first shot at that capital they needed to stay in business. And then, just being able to have the solid relationships with other business owners who you could share information with, that you could say, okay, because as Christina said, there was no roadmap to this. And so what are you doing? What's working for you? And you could bounce those kinds of things off of. And so that was more vital than ever during the pandemic. And then I think the final thing I would say about relationships is that it has just really warmed my heart to witness the willingness of so many business owners, many of them who are competitors, that have worked together through this time to make sure that they pulling each other through. Or they're not, or and they're helping the underserved in the community. For example, there's this one group of restaurant owners that I know that banded together and they got sponsors so they could prepare food for agencies that serve the hungry. And that was a win-win because the restaurants were able to use that sponsor money to keep their employees working, so they could prepare the food, and then the hungry in the community got fed. But to do those kinds of things takes strong relationships. So, that networking, those bonds that you form there. And I think women are just really great at that. In fact, it was a women-led effort. The example I just gave about the restaurants, that was a women-led effort.
the emphasis that all of you place on relationships and leadership and is notwithstanding, Christina, I agree with you. Access to capital is the issue. That to me that is that's kind of your essential ingredient as women business owners, is getting that and understanding that and making that such a driving force of how you do business. So Jen, I want to kind of turn to you and ask, um, government played an outsized role in 2020 in helping small business. Um, did it do enough? Has it done enough? And I'm not really trying to make this a political conversation, but has it done enough to really specifically help women-owned small businesses? And let's just, go down the list: childcare, access to capital, um, you know, fair treatment when it comes to contracting, particularly with large companies or government. Is there a role for government to frankly right some of these wrongs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as always, there's always a role for everyone to come together and make things better. And I would say, looking at where we are now, coming from where we've been, we have a lot of rebuilding to do. And that's going to be up to everybody really coming together to do that. NABO has a really big advocacy arm. We were born an advocacy organization, really coming together to forward the movement of women entrepreneurs who were not even included in the census or contribute viable contributors to the U.S. economy, and that was in 1988. Still, women still couldn't get their own bank loan without a male cosigner. So the advocacy part has been super, super crucial, but the government doesn't know what they don't know. And so it's really important for the women business owners to say, hey, look, these are our issues, these are our problems. And regardless of the partisanship of it, like, let's come together and figure out how we can make this work for everybody. So I would say, yes, there definitely is a role. I would say the bipartisan issue is really, really key to make sure that we're coming together to make things work for all business owners, and looking at things holistically, as opposed to like, what is a short-term Band-Aid? What is a long-term approach here? One thing with the access to capital is that a lot of women business owners don't use, like, they don't get credit, they don't get lines of credit, they use their own personal assets, they're not
Mhm.
wanting to go into major debt and that sort of thing. So when it came that at first, when the PPP loans came out, we didn't know if it was going to be forgiven, or who would be able to receive it, and who, when it was forgiven, who was going to be able to get it forgiven. So there was a lot of hesitancy in even trying to do that because there was so many mixed messages. So I think a lot of it also is from the government's perspective, making sure that they're super clear when things are being rolled out and that they understand all the parameters, so that it's not, our business owners were very, very confused, and they went to their banks and their bank said, well, we're not doing this. And they had to figure out who they could go to get the money. So aside from the fact that the capital was drying up because they weren't getting the income, they were
Mhm.
also super stressed about, like, how am I supposed to get this money? And then am I going to have it forgiven? Because if I have to end this year with another $150,000 in debt that I didn't start with, like, that's kind of a huge bummer. You know what I mean? Like, that's huge recovery. That's not hiring people, that's laying off people, that's figuring out whether or not you can provide insurance. You know what I mean? There's like a lot of ramifications there. So the grants, I think, are super helpful. I think that anything that, like, there's a lot of corporations out there that are saying, here's a 10,000, Facebook did it, I think MasterCard did it, here's a $10,000 application, fill out the grant application, get this money in to really help you. Because if it's not a forgiven thing and it's an additional line of credit or additional, like, debt that you're taking on, that's just another big burden. So I would say, yes, there is a lot to do. Can the government just keep throwing free money at us? I don't think that's probably a possibility. I think we're going to have to figure out, like, what's going to make the most sense for our local economies and our global economy to figure that out. But I think it's going to take a lot of people really sitting around and hearing a lot of information from a lot of people and business owners to understand, like, what those answers are. So I would say with the childcare thing, I know that there's been a lot of talk around the tax incentives and all of that. I think that that's great. I mean, definitely that can help. There's companies like Bank of America, for example, that was actually paying their employees stipends so that they could get additional childcare, so that they could work and get the childcare that they needed. So things like that, where corporations are actually really helping their employees, I think is a beautiful idea. For small businesses, though, that might be unrealistic. You know what I mean? Like, we barely have enough to make ends meet, and so there, it's definitely a problem. I would say getting the vaccine out and getting control of the pandemic obviously is going to help, because as people can get out into the community and really start, like, living life and generating income again, that's really, really crucial. But then as Christina said too, like, and Christina didn't share this, and I hope you don't mind that I'm sharing this about you, Christina, but she's actually had to work in her business as opposed to on it a lot of times because she doesn't have the employees to do it. So she's driving out to sites in the middle of the night to actually do the work of her business because she can't find the right people to do it. And that's a big problem. I mean, when you're taking the business owners and you're saying, okay, now you have to manage this, but you have to work in it too and do all of these things plus all of these other things that are creating additional burden with your family and your, that kind of thing. It just becomes very overwhelming. So I would say another one of the, I didn't mention this before and I should have in the I guess, issues or problems or things that came out of last year was also the self-care and understanding the importance of really taking care of ourselves as women business owners and as women in general to say, okay, I need to put on my mask first before I help anyone else. Because if I'm not taking care of myself, I can't be a good leader. I can't be a good employer. I can't be a good wife or mother or whatever that role is that I'm playing right now because I just am completely depleted. And I think that that happened to a lot of our women business owners this past year. They just were like, enough of this is just too much. Is that the direction you're headed?
That was such a great, I mean, wow. I mean, I wish I could just put that in a bottle because I think it summarizes so many of the different issues that I think, and not to ask that leading question is what's the role of government? I think what you cracked open was really a great portrait of the challenges that women business owners face. And I guess, Christina, to you, what help do you need specifically as a woman-owned business to really, frankly, I don't want to say level the playing field because that has so many bad implications to it, but just simply get done what you need to get done as a woman business owner?
Well, Jen mentioned for 45 years, NAWBO has given us the seat at the table so that our voices can be heard by our legislators, not only in Washington, D.C., but also in all the states our chapters represent. When we can tell our stories and put truth and real life experiences in our businesses behind those stories, and our legislators actually listen, wow, wonderful things happen. And we do need to bring, our legislators need to help bring the women business owners back to where we were pre-pandemic. And you said level the playing field, but I like to say our legislators need to ensure there is parity and continues to be parity moving forward, because the sizes of our businesses vary. The definition of a small business is 500 employees or fewer. Very, way more than the majority of our members they aren't there. They aren't there. So that parity is so very important. And it will take for some normalcy to come back. It will take our children returning to school and the changing of societal norms around household responsibilities for women to reach that growth that was pushing, obviously pushing the US economy forward in the past several decades. And also, it will take our lawmakers and the Small Business Administration empowering the woman business owner with the resources that we need to build our businesses online, like Kelly said, and finding new ways back to access to capital, finding new ways to get capital into the hands of women business owners across the country.
That's a great, again, you guys are awesome. Kelly, I mean, you're an entrepreneur and you've been around a lot of entrepreneurs, I know, and watch them grow. With only 7% of startup capital being given to women-owned startups, what are we getting so wrong? I mean, what goes missing in this process where we don't seem to value in the form of good old American cash the ideas and the strength of women business owners? Is it just, frankly, institutional chauvinism, or what is it that is making it so difficult for women to start businesses and get the capital they need?
Well, you asked the $64 million question there, and if I could answer that, I would be in a totally different business right now. But I think there might be some insights that I can provide. I think one of the issues is that the types of businesses that women start are not necessarily some of the traditional businesses that men or the people who are investing understand, and so I think there's a little bit of that, educating more about how what kind of businesses women run, although women are making huge strides in technology and construction and some of the businesses that were traditionally all male dominated. A long ways to go, but there are inroads being made there. So I think that there's just an education about the kinds of businesses that women start and why they're investable. I mean, I interviewed, and I hope she doesn't mind me using her as an example, but like Claudia Harvey, I don't know if you know her, she invented, or she's the owner of Dig It Apparel, and she was out digging in her flower garden and ruined her nails. And she was at a barbecue the next day, told her, I interviewed her on my podcast the other day, and anyway, she was grousing about how her nails were all messed up, and she had to go back to the office on Monday with her manicure messed up. And yet, what she did is she got to work designing a garden glove that had in the fingers, it had a protective gel or something. I don't know exactly what it was, that protects women's nail jobs. And it then Lowe's Canada, Lowe's Home Depot started carrying it. Now she's got a full line of products that cater to women for garden work, and she's headlining, or she's on the stage with Tony Robbins. I mean, this all started because she didn't like the fact that her manicure was getting messed up in the garden. So some people might look at something like that and go, a garden glove? Really? I'm going to invest in a garden glove. It works, So I think that sometimes we just have to have a better understanding of the kinds of businesses. And then I think too that women like to talk with other women about things, and I am heartened by the fact that, like here in Kansas City, we have the Women's Capital Connection, and it is high net worth women, and it's women business owners and former women business owners who pool their money and they invest in other women-owned businesses.
Wow.
And so I think if we could see more of those kinds of pools, those kinds of funding pools, that will make progress as well. And so, like I said, if I had the answers to everything, I would be in a different business when it comes to this topic. But those are just a couple of things that, as you ask the question, that strike me.
Yeah, and I don't mean to ask the question naively. I mean that I do understand that there are some things that are institutional, and they're almost recalcitrant. I mean, they're just so embedded in the way things have been done. My question to you guys, really kind of final question, is here's our community of very large businesses that sell to small businesses that I hate to use the word woke, but got woke in 2020 to a lot of frankly, the issues that their customers broadly faced, but very specific verticals of their small business customer bases faced. What can we do to help? And I asked that actually, little asterisk, what can we do to help that isn't just throwing money at the problem? Jump ball, anybody?
Well, I would say education. I think that there's a lot of these big corporations that have a ton of resources, you know what I mean? And they can provide a lot of different mentoring or different kinds of opportunities that our business owners can connect to. So I think that that is amazing. I mean, throwing money at the problem may or may not help. I feel like some of these corporations that are providing grants they're doing really amazing work and really focusing on that. I would say partnering with organizations like ours that are trying to we have a partnership with AARP right now, where we're working with 40 women of color that have kind of started their business and are rolling with it to really help them get to that next level. So partnering to create the right education to really focus on this demographic that has been, I mean, women of color obviously have been crushed during this year, and like really helping them gain ground and traction, providing opportunities for them to connect. I mean, it's one of the things that we do as an organization, for them to connect with each other and learn from each other so that they don't feel in going through this. So I would say the education and sharing of resources would be super helpful. Purchasing from small business owners, like when they're purchasing for Christmas gifts, like look for vendors that are selling beautiful baskets or the candles or the, you know what I mean? Like whatever that is, gift certificates to young women for a STEM program, things like that, that they can use, that they're going to be doing anyway, but invest in the women business owners that can provide these kinds of gifts and things like that. And then just personally purchasing from small business owners that we know of, like when we're doing our own shopping for Christmas or for birthday gifts, go to the woman that we know that makes beautiful jewelry, or, you know what I mean? Like there's so many amazing opportunities to support women businesses. And even, I would say we talk about two things in NAWBO. We talk about this of women business owners. I mean, the mentorship, having a mentor and all of that, but sponsoring is very different. When you sponsor a woman business owner, you open doors for her. So you may know of someone that has a really amazing business that says, you know what, I know you do this, and I actually know another person in another corporation that might be able to help you. I'm going to connect you with them because you might be a really great resource, and really finding those opportunities to connect them so that they can get business from other people that they wouldn't normally have known, they wouldn't have had that connection to or that contact to be able to make. So I would say sponsoring them to get them into the right relationships.
Christina, what would you add to that?
Dave, well, understanding how much entrepreneurship has influenced the success of large business. Mm-hmm. And in turn, it goes both ways, how their success can influence entrepreneurship for the better. Mm-hmm. Women-owned small businesses can also be helped by being able to hold on to their much-needed capital with the offering of reduced costs, mm-hmm. products and services that we need to operate our businesses when possible. Mm-hmm. And also to take into consideration what small woman-owned businesses can bring to the table. Select us as vendor partners, mm-hmm. give us equal access to opportunities.
That's terrific. And Kelly, what would you say? What can our community do?
There are some interesting things that are being done now with corporations and incubators. Sprint, for example, in Kansas City had an incubator for small businesses where and they had a grant program. And so, there's just those kinds of environments so that women can test their ideas, especially women in startup situations. And so often a key to getting capital or investment dollars is proof of concept. Mm-hmm. So if you have a corporation that is already behind you, that has been working with you, that has been giving you feedback on whatever product or prototype that you've been putting together, you can go to investors and say, hey, I've got this company that is already using it, and they're likely going to become a customer when it hits the marketplace. That's just really powerful. So those kinds of relationships with startup businesses who are developing products, who are in the tech industry, and not just tech, but that's just one example. Those are very, very powerful. And one thing that I would add is that women tend to be very, very loyal. And so if you demonstrate commitment, if you show trust in a woman business owner, that woman business owner is going to be very, very loyal to you for the long term. That's not across the board, but that's been my experience, is that women are incredibly loyal, and they will remember that and then support those large businesses that have shown up for them and that have had programs in place that help to propel their growth and success.
And that encourages that many in our audience should focus on this. It's good for business, to say the least. I'll ask you guys very openly, will you help us develop more initiatives inside the Institute and on behalf of our community to serve women-owned small businesses?
Say anything, any support. There's not enough.
No question.
So we'll take it.
Terrific. I'll leave with one heartening statistic that I actually heard today. Um, you may already know this, maybe you don't, but I was interviewing one of the senior executives of Yelp, and Yelp, of course, not last year, but maybe a little bit before that, started to kind of focus their reviews and their ratings in some areas that weren't just about the quality of food, for instance. And one of the things that they focused on was women-owned businesses. So they started to identify in their listings, in Yelp listings and reviews, hey, this is a women-owned business. Since they've done that, and really, which was, I think, in late 2019, the search activity for women-owned small businesses has increased by 384%. And it really is and we all know the startling volume of search that goes on in Yelp. I mean, it is, probably, other than Google, the most favorite search engine when you're really looking for so many different things. And I just thought, I stopped Peter Curzon, who's the executive that was interviewing, just said, wait a minute, stop. Did you just say that the search volume has increased by 384%? Because I think that at least indicates that the most important piece of this equation of women-owned small businesses success are consumers, are your customers. And if they're coming along and saying, hey, I really want to patronize women-owned small business, then that again lends courage to virtue for government, for industry, for B2SMB players at a large scale to really, really get behind this, because it's what we all really want. It's what we all really want to do. Thank you guys so much for doing this. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Dave. It was a pleasure.
And
Thank
Christina, thank you very much. And Kelly, great to see you again.
You too, Dave. Great job. You're a great facilitator.
Thank you. I appreciate it.